Well, I hope you enjoyed this film.
Amazing,
Anyway,
absolutely.
I now invite Professor Malashri Lal. Professor Malashri Lal is a distinguished writer, academic, has authored 22 books and retired as the Dean of Colleges at the University of Delhi, India. She has held prestigious fellowships from Fulbright, the Rockefeller Foundation, and the British Council, conducting research at Harvard, Bellagio, and Newcastle. I believe she has also taught in York University, Toronto. Her works include Tagore and the Feminine and the acclaimed Goddess Trilogy, In Search of Sita, Finding Radha, Treasures of Lakshmi. She has co-edited with Namita Gokhale. Their co-authored play Betrayed by Hope won the Kalinga Fiction Award. Her poetry collection Mandalas of Time has been widely praised and translated into Hindi as Mandal Dhwani, where Meena has also contributed translations for 5 poems. Currently, Mala serves as the convener of the English Advisory Board at the Sahitya Academy and chair of the English Advisory Board at Bharatiya Gyanpith. She is a recipient of the Maharani Gayatri Devi Award for Women's Excellence. Please welcome Professor Malashri Lal.
Thank you very much, Bhupinder, for that generous introduction. And hello, friends from across the world. It's indeed a great honor and a privilege to be the first speaker on the panel when so many well-known, wonderful, productive, creative persons are with me. I will keep my remarks short because I'm very keen to hear all of you. Well, we just saw this very dynamic film. Meena, congratulations. And I think you've taken the idea of poetry and art beyond just the visual page by turning it into the resources of digital technology. And that has given it a sort of a dynamism that I've never seen before. And I think it's a most innovative way of presenting your talents and for making the world aware that as we move towards digitization, the possibilities for innovation are fantastic and the opportunity should be taken up. So I'd first like to mention that it's an enormous honor that Meena Chopra asked me to write the foreword to this volume. And because of that, I do have copies of the book. and and I decided to call the foreword Poetic Pirouettes because I just felt that there was so much movement, so much change, so much um, fluidity in what she was presenting that it kept the reader very alert and very focused on whatever image was in front of us. So I'm going to make three very brief points, and if there are any questions afterwards, I'm happy to take them. The first of these is my deep interest in how the diaspora writers look upon certain traditional Indian material, such as mythology. So when I turned to Meena's poem, there's one called A Mythological Chronology, and in which she talks about the origin myths that we have in Indian scriptures, and that is the three figures of Brahma, Vishnu, and Mahesh. Now, Brahma is the creator, and Vishnu and Mahesh are companions to this figure, of course. But what interests me as a feminist thinker is that two of them has women consorts who are their equals. I've just finished a book on Lakshmi, who's a consort of Vishnu, and Mahesh or Shiva, of course, is Parvati, the other half of the figure of unity, what we call the Ardhanarishwar. So when I looked at this poem, I said, how does Meena Chopra, living in Toronto, Mississauga, view this? And I was absolutely transported to another world which looks upon the interrelatedness of the cultures of where she is and where she comes from, and what she uses as transiting points from one to the other. So, this eternal cycle of being everywhere at the same time and yet being nowhere because you're constantly in transcendence and in movement. So, although the idea comes from the triptych of the three figures I mentioned, I'm just going to read two lines from her poem where she transmits this into the diaspora consciousness. Realities and yearnings, entwined legends buried in stones, engraving narratives. So that's the whole point, the entwining of the diasporic consciousness and the Indian heritage. The second point I want to make is something Meena mentioned in her introduction, the idea of the unitary woman. And Meena has an earlier volume that is called She. And from the film that we saw and the book that I hold, it's very evident that this woman is never static. And I love the fluidity of that figure, that she's always in a rotating motion. And also, she's never front faced. The mystical awareness of the woman being unpredictable, of being forever present, for never having a time or space limitation upon her, is something that I found utterly and absolutely attractive. There and as Meena also mentioned, and I put in my introduction, that she is now, she is then, she is forever. And I'm again reading a few lines from Meena's poetry in her words. Says, "Kiss me with a mouthful of eternity, raid me, tread the wizard apart, mold me with playful reality, siege me with coarse fertility." So I'm enchanted with these ideas of movement, identification of femininity as an energy, as a force, and yet not pinning it down. And technology, Meena, has made it possible for you to actually demonstrate that, and it's wonderful. I'll end by making a very brief reference to Meena's last poem, where she pays a tribute to the Pil Country Group. And because some of our friends here may not know what she's referring to, it's an informal group that meets in Delhi once in a couple of months. And Meena has been with us on some such occasions. There are many other participants here from Delhi who have attended these meetings. Point is that, well, we have an enormously old bearded fig tree in the garden. And it seems to remind me of the old Rabindranath Tagore story that the highest creativity comes when you're surrounded by nature. And when a group of poets decided to meet here and read their poetry, my husband and I were only too happy to provide the hospitality. Now, the Pil Country poets have become like an entity in themselves. But what I think is important is a reminder that the heritage of poetry in India is a collective act. It's not an individual act. And it goes back to the oral repertoires of ancient Indian folklore or folk poetry and also the classical poetry, that it was always in a group and it was always evolving. There was nothing called imitation or plagiarism or anything of that kind. Everybody was encouraged to write the same thing or speak the same thing in a different way, adapting to the individual ways and attitudes of the storyteller or the poet. And the Pil Country is just an idea which picks up that collective nature, that democratic spread of what poetry means. It's not sitting in a room by yourself and penning poems, that's also possible, but periodically to share it with one another. I end there by saying congratulations, and let poetry and art and the dynamism of Meena's work flourish.
Thank you, Maladi, so much. It was really great.